if Melissa Joan Hart is in a film, I'm going to watch it. And it occurred to me recently that I've seen a lot of her films with Lifetime, her more recent releases. One of the very first films I reviewed on my channel 11 years ago was Nine Dead. But I haven't seen that many of her films released from around Sabrina. And given that Sabrina is one of my greatest of all loves, I do have the logo tattooed to my arm, I thought it's about time that I changed that. And I started with Aunt Agatha's Apartment, the 2003 film. This was, for reference, out the year Sabrina finished. I believe this is also called Rent Control. And it's not very well received. It's got 3.8 out of 10 on IMDb, which is not great. And this is considering this is a film that's got Melissa Joan Hart and Carmen Electra in it. And while you should never rate a film based on the casting, let's face it, the better the cast, the higher the rating might be. This had a relatively interesting sounding premise, but the execution was just monotonous. Most of the characters I didn't like, and they weren't very well developed, but it does sound interesting. So it's written and directed by David Eric Brenner, and the description from IMDb sums it nicely, and this says, a young Iowan couple move into Aunt Agatha's rent-controlled apartment in Manhattan, while looking for an apartment and jobs. When Agatha dies 6 weeks later, they decide to keep it a secret and stay. So Holly moves in with her partner, Holly played by Melissa Joan Hart, moves in with her partner into Aunt Agatha's house. But shortly while they're there, Aunt Agatha dies, obviously because she was renting this property. Now that she's deceased, if the authorities find out, or the building owners find out, they're obviously going to kick Holly and her partner out and rent the flat to somebody else. But they've moved to Manhattan to try and make it as actors. They have no jobs, they have no money. So they decide that they're not going to tell anybody that Agatha died. And quite early on, they realise that this is going to be quite tricky. Certain people have to be involved in their scheme, people within the building. Will they be able to keep it a secret by the end of the film? It sounded interesting, because I thought, how are you going to manage to do that? But there are a few downfalls. First of all, the narrative itself. The execution is not interesting. The problems they encounter are completely unrealistic. There were escapes they could have had to hide the truth very easily. But instead, they tried to do these far-fetched things to mask this death, and it just didn't work. It was completely unbelievable. The characters themselves were really boring. Holly, I didn't mind Holly too much, but Calvin I really didn't like. I just thought he was exceptionally dull, a little bit annoying, and not really aware of the world around him. He was just annoying to watch, to be perfectly honest. And Agatha I really liked, for the very brief amount of time that she was in it. One of my favourite scenes in this, actually, is when Holly realises the cats are not there. The house is usually, the flat, it's usually littered with cats, and they're not there. And then, of course, well, I won't say what happens next, but it's pretty obvious. I liked that scene. And that's probably the only scene that I did properly enjoy. Aside from that, there wasn't really anything in this that I thought was decent. A lot of it is not awful. For example, the editing is fine, the casting is fine, the acting is fine. The pacing is fine. I don't like what happens, but at least it happens at a steady pace. You know, the soundtrack is unmemorable, but at least it wasn't bad. It's rare that I will watch a Melissa Joan Hart film and say virtually nothing positive about it, because I love her, and I just love watching her perform. But as I said, I haven't seen that many from around the Sabrina era, so maybe there are some weaker links in the earlier days. Absolutely nothing to do with her, of course. It's just the film, the way it's written, and her character a little bit as well. And Agatha's Apartment, Rent Control, whatever you want to call it, had an interesting premise. If you don't take it seriously, you might get a little out of it, but for me, it's certainly not a film I'm going to be watching again.